there was a lot of things I lost along the way. Possessions, worldly possessions. And the things that stuck with me were the relationships, which helped me to get on my feet fast. I had great relationships with vendors and suppliers and customers. And so I was able to recover quick because, if gas moves 2 cents a gallon, the average load, let's call it 8,500 gallons. Well, that's $170. So I was able to, hey, let's load this before 6 or let's load this after 6, which is when the price would change. And so we were using that.
Cool if you can make 300 grand, but that's, it's like, so every dollar is not equal. Some businesses are way more stressful, more hands-on, or harder to delegate.
You got to have a customer to get to the terminal, but you can't get in the terminal without a customer. Back in 2008, I was running wide open. If I had $10,000 to invest in a property, I was putting it down. I really was, probably pushing it harder than I should. But everybody was like, hey, I'm just putting a contract on a beach house. I'm not even closing, and I'm going to flip my contract on my beach house and make $50,000 or $100,000 or $200,000. So I jumped in and I was buying, and how I got really crushed is I was buying residential, the asset class that you can't really lose in. I figured out a way to screw that up.
My name's Max Gagliardi, and this is Always Be Building. If you're watching this video, take a moment, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, or you can follow me on your favorite podcast app. Hope you enjoy the show. Chris, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Max, I appreciate it. And this is kind of overdue. I think you reached out to me when I had about 10,000 followers. And I was like, Max, I don't know if I ever want to do this or not. Wait till I get to 20,000. When I get to 20,000, I'll jump on. So a little late to the party, but I'm here, man. I'm here. So thanks for thinking enough of what I bring to even want to sit down and spend a few minutes with me. So I really, pleasure's all mine.
Well, I was trying to coax you into doing it early on. I was like, yeah, you don't need 20,000 followers. It was like, it'll be good. And I just saw the content you were putting out and I liked it. And there's some similarities, like I work I sell gas, you sell gas, albeit it's a different type of gas. But, I've worked in the commodities marketing space my whole career and have also done real estate. And I just saw some of the stuff you were putting out and I was like, this is super interesting. I think a lot of people agree with me because you grew a following very quickly, but mainly just like this connection around being in kind of the commodities business. And it's a place that I've always loved. And I have a place, near and dear to my heart, but it's like a very niche part of the oil and gas space. And I'm more upstream, you're more downstream in retail. And I think like the stories you were able to weave in being on the retail side are a lot cooler than the stories that I've had kind of on the corporate side. But, recently you did an episode with Chris Powers. I'll encourage people to watch that because you went into a lot of detail on your background. And I try to keep these in an hour. So for those who haven't seen that, just a quick overview, a little bit of your background, who you are, and then we'll launch off.
So what I am is I'm a second generation gas station owner. My dad was in the business. I had 3 uncles in the business. And outside of that, it kind of grew to some of my cousins got into the business too. I'm the last person left doing it. The rest of them have either sold their stores or gotten to other industries and careers. So, I grew up in this. I dropped out of high school in the 9th grade. And I had 2 trips there. And school was not for me. So I wanted to go work. And this is one reason why I have this big aversion to generational wealth, because I really felt in my heart of hearts, I didn't need to be successful in things at school because I knew I had an opportunity to get my dad's store. And so when you have that carrot out there that maybe you don't have to do all those things, that maybe it gets your eye off the prize. And that's what it did to me. So I dropped out of school, went in and took over my dad's gas station in 1995. Bought 25% of that from him and built it up from there. We did great. I was not educated in finance. Was not educated in general, formally, and bought a lot of real estate, got over leveraged, got over my skis, like a lot of people did in 06, 08, lost it all and was able to recover and actually built up a great business, sold it in 2016 and just been kind of kicked around for a few years, really enjoyed myself. And then I got back to work in 2019 because of COVID. So I got back in 2019 and now I'm in the fuel hauling business. So I've been hauling fuel for actually since 08, I've been hauling fuel. And so I have a transport company here based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and that is the market that we cover.
It's awesome, and you really went over that quickly. There's a bunch of great stories in and ups and downs in between there, and we'll cover some of it. But the
Hmm.
family business part's interesting to me. You know, I had my dad's a geologist and was in the oil and gas business. He doesn't do what I do, and I was always
Hmm.
kind of on the fence. And he kind of always told me, he's like, "This is up and down business. You know, you maybe don't want to do this." But you thought from an early age, basically, that this is kind of the path that you did. You always had that in the back of your head, or was it something you were focused on saying, "Hey, this is what I want to get into"?
I loved it. Okay. So I loved it so much. And probably like a lot of young men, I really uh, looked up to what our family was doing, and we were very proud of it. And so we had so much pride. I know it's just a gas station to people, but what you have to do in business oftentimes is you don't look at just the transaction you're doing, but what does it do? Okay. It keeps people cars running in the neighborhood. It gets people gas to get to work. It creates jobs for the cashiers. And, as petty as that sounds, it was all very important to me. And we always had a top performing location. So we worked it really, really hard. And it was a great living. I mean, we did not live, a lot of people think that, hey, you own a gas station and you're probably just trying to, you know, pound two nickels together to try to get a dime. No, we were making a great living. My dad was. So it was just I was really proud of it. I mean, we were in a great area of town, and it was just something to me. I thought it was really cool. So because of how much I enjoyed it, that was my target, and I went right after it.
Well, I agree with all those things you said. I mean, I grew up, my dad saying what I do is it's kind of an invisible thing that people don't think about, and he
Hmm.
was more on the exploration, like finding the raw product in the ground. But he's like, this is kind of what powers the world. And he always felt like it was a
Hmm.
noble profession and that people
Yeah,
took it for granted, like they just go fill up their car and they don't think about it, right? Like people just walk in and I don't know that people put thought around it in terms of like the value that it's adding to society. I mean, it's just kind of in the background.
yeah. I mean, if we didn't have the gas, the guy can't get to work. And you go, okay, well, the next guy down the street. Well, what if none of us had gas? You know what I'm saying? But that's just how we viewed it. We just viewed it that we were really providing a service to the community. I mean, the people would come in, and that was kind of one of the things that set us apart. Is that if you were local and you were a regular customer, it's like, hey, what do you like to drink, Max? Well, we'll make sure that we got whatever flavor Red Bull that you like, or Pepsi or Coke or whatever it is. And so we would cater to that versus if you were going into like one of the large locations, maybe they have to fit a planogram that corporation calls for, where I didn't have to do that. I was like, hey, next time the Coke vendor's in town, make sure I get Tab for Max. Max likes Tab, and no one else would have it, for example. So those are the things we did, and so they became regulars, and you made friendships, and like I said, I mean, I just loved it. I mean, you know, people I think make fun of me sometimes because it's like I genuinely love what I do. If you said to me, hey, Chris, would you want to if you could be Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk? I mean, no, no, no. I
Yeah.
I would trade with nobody. I love what I do.
Well, I relate to that. I love what I do too. And I've always felt fortunate that in the hydrocarbon business broadly, let's just talk, there's upstream, midstream, downstream, there's all these different segments. There's a lot of
Hmm.
specialized kind of niche roles where you're like an engineer or you're like a science, there's all these things where you kind of focus on one piece of it. And what I liked about the commodity marketing business is that you get to kind of touch a lot of different things. I mean, there's the human
Hmm.
interaction of like negotiating deals. And, I think what you're describing is you got to have the people element to it, where you're getting to interact with those people, having those relationships. But there's also like a lot of technical stuff going on in the background. You got to procure fuel, you got inventory. I mean, just it seems like you have to wear a lot of hats, I guess is the question with what you do.
Yeah, and I don't think that's unique to our industry because just about anybody who runs a small business, I mean, we had inventory, and you had the levels that you wanted to maintain in order to prevent running out. And I feel like that was it was one of our advantages when we were very successful in it, is because we maintained proper inventory. Okay. Some people would run on a shoestring, and we would not. We were, in fact, we had too much inventory, and that allowed you to buy the top deals. So you got the best pricing. So you're getting better pricing. I can sell it better. And I never ran out. And so these were just some common sense, just that you think everybody does, but they don't in our industry. I mean, that was one of the things I did to turn stores around is put proper inventory. So, and then outside of that, it's managing people, and that's probably the most difficult part of this is trying to
Mm.
say, hey, these are not high paying jobs. When you have somebody who's running a cash register, these people are making, at the time they were making $1 over minimum wage, for example. And how do I keep them on board? How do I keep that person from calling in? And, then you're competing with social programs because they could make almost as much money staying at home. So there was an art to it. The first year, my turnover was terrible. And, as an employer, a lot of times you want to tell people what's on your mind, but a lot of times you tell people what's on your mind, and there's a price to pay for that. So I told you what I thought of you, and they may not be there the next morning. So there is real art to it. That to me was the most difficult part was to manage the people. Now it's very easy. It just comes second nature. That is, I think, the differentiator between a good company and a great company is the culture.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think what was interesting to me when I listened to the last episode, last podcast, maybe the only podcast you've done, unless I missed another one you did out there. But what I found interesting is I've got a business partner who's 30 years my senior, and he's always kind of preached that there's like a difference between knowledge and wisdom. And just because you
Hmm.
know something or you heard about it or you thought you learned it until you kind of live through some things, that's where like the wisdom piece
Hmm.
comes in. And a lot of your stories, it felt like you had knowledge early in your career from growing up around it, had some success,
Hmm.
but then through like the trials and different things you had to go through, you gain that wisdom. And that's kind of where you are today. It seems like you're, from what I'm hearing from the stories, it's like you've got that wisdom now, and that's making you a lot better operator and just better in general at running a business.
There's no question. So even though my dad, taught me the business, it was really through osmosis. It was not, hey, let's sit down and I'm going to teach you how to do inventory. Let's sit down. I'm going to teach you how to run a checkbook. Let's sit down. I'm going to teach you how to price. None of that was ever explained to me. It was just kind of you just listened, and then from that you kind of picked it up. Which is the same way I built my real estate company, which was like no one ever showed me how to do it. I just kind of self-taught. But the thing is, it's just more of a holistic approach. For me, it's no longer like I'm not chasing. When you're younger, it's like, hey, you want to be the wealthiest person with the best car and the best house, or maybe not everybody does, but that's what I wanted. I was very competitive, and so I really transitioned after I lost it all to what really did matter and what was really still with me through all that. And there was a lot of things I lost along the way, possessions, worldly possessions. And the things that stuck with me were the relationships, which helped me to get on my feet fast. I had great relationships with vendors and suppliers and customers. And so I was able to recover quick because I was able to hang on to those things. The material things went away. My wife, she could have left me. Okay. So when she married me, I was doing very well. We were maybe 27, something like this. And I was doing very good, making a few $100,000 a year. And so, hey man, let me get with this guy. He's looking great, has a full head of hair, no wrinkles, the guy's great. And then all of a sudden, a pocket full of money. Then all of a sudden, a few years later, she's in the kitchen with me making biscuits in the morning because we can't pay the mortgage. And, my hair's damn gone and, look, aged like I served in the White House for 8 years. And so those were the people that they stuck with me. Number one, the family stuck with me, the customers stuck with me. And then of course, not to get in my pulpit, but, my relationship with my creator got stronger, and those are my values, and that is all I work on now. And whatever possessions end up coming after it, that's fantastic. Okay, but it's not the goal for me.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. I want to talk about the adversity stuff here in a little bit and some of
Hmm.
the dealing with not just failure, but also success. But I'm kind of, I want to get at the beginning here a little more technical on some of the fuel hauling business and what you're doing today.
Hmm.
Because I've had enough liquids marketing experience to know that that's a tough business. We work with
Very.
producers and we help them bid we talking barrels, typically you talking probably gallons, but help lease barrels get sold. And we've got a natural gas marketing company, and there we were able to take title and be purchaser and sell product. But on the oil side, usually is like an agent, like helping broker things because there's just a lot in it. I mean, you got to have infrastructure, you got to have trucks or a pipeline or an injection point or storage or some type of an edge. And so I'm curious, like, you talked about buying into that, your first transportation business. Was it harder than you thought? What edge did you think you guys had? And then what have you learned about being competitive in that industry? Because from what I know, it's tough.
It's very tough. For the downstream, I think everybody will argue that they have the most difficult part of the process. But for downstream, I think that the fuel hauling side, I believe to be the hardest. I've been a wholesaler, I've been a retailer. Uh, Being a fuel transporter has been by far the most challenging. It is, and you really got to get any scale to make it worthwhile. And then you have this huge liability piece, and it continues to grow as far as the exposure that we run with every day. And it is very tough. So when I started it, I had to buy the truck. That was part of the deal. You want my business, you got to buy my truck. All right. So I bought the guy's truck. And it came with a driver. And so we hired the driver and, to come with us. And so it was kind of natural because I already had my own gallons that I could transport. I wasn't really making any money because what I was paying him, what it cost to run the truck, I only had one truck. It was just really service. So what it allowed me to do at first was like a little edge on pricing because, if gas moves 2 cents a gallon, the average load, let's call it 8,500 gallons. Well, that's $170. Back to what I said earlier, if you were good at inventory management and you had the capital to be able to, play with your inventory, it helped you out a lot. So I was able to, hey, let's load this before 6 or let's load this after 6, which is when the price would change. And so we were using that. We used it that, finding a reliable carrier is very, very difficult. So when I had my own in-house carrier, we were able to service our customers and we got a great reputation because my stores wouldn't run out. Like my stores were a priority as opposed to when it was a common carrier we were given the business to. Maybe the bigger the customer, the higher the
Mm.
priority that customer was. And we were not a big company. So I got into it. Um, just kind of, it's kept going with it. And it's just like, as things came to me, hey, so-and-so's got a truck for sale. Do you want to buy it? And we would have a little extra capacity on my truck because I couldn't keep it busy every day. And some of my friends in the industry would say, hey, our common carrier let us down. Can you grab that load for me? Sure. Why not? I don't have it. He's got nothing else to do. We'll go run it for you. And it just kind of, then once they saw how good we took of their account, we started getting more and more and more. And then it got to a point where it kind of stopped. And then there's another part of that story, but that's how we got going with it. But it was, to get into it is very hard because you got to have a customer to get into the terminal,
Right.
but you can't get in the terminal without a customer. Okay, so you know what I mean. So we're both you like got your guns pointed at each other because you're going, well, how are you going to get in it? Well, you don't have any customers. Well, I can't get a customer because I don't have any. I can't get in the terminal. So it's kind of like chicken and the egg deal, and so it really keeps a lot of people out of it. And on top of that, the margins just there's a better the return on the investment is not necessarily the best, and it's a very very difficult thing to operate. So but I love it. There's nothing else I'd rather do. I'm not trying to poo poo on it. I'm just saying it is we just don't, I run it because I love it, not because I'm going, this is the best way in the world to make money.
It's a tough business. I mean, when I look at it, I don't know the ins and outs of how your segment of the industry works, but I know enough to know you've got to have those supplier relationships, that you have to have the
Mm-hmm.
customer relationships. I know that it's not always just competing on price. I mean, sometimes when we bid out for haulers for crude, it's like, yeah, that person might be a little better price, but like, do I trust them? Like when we dispatch it, will they be there on time? Do our field folks like working with, their field folks? Are they, I mean, there's just all these factors, and then it's ruthless. It's like, people want to take you to bid and you get taken to bid, sometimes frequently, sometimes you can term something up, but a lot of times it's like short term in nature. I mean, are those similar types of issues that you would face in your side of it?
Very much so. We have done a very, very, very good job of decommoditizing who we are. And we accomplish that through just the way that we service. And people go, well, what do you mean by that? It is the way we turn around paperwork. It is the way we
Mm.
respond. It is the way that we receive orders. It is the deck of customers I'm willing to work for. I won't work for everybody. I don't, again, back to, I'm not doing this purely for money. So if you're a person that I have a hard time with and I'm rubbing against, I'm not going to go work and spend the best part of my day around people that I am having a hard time, gets my blood pressure up and that sort of thing. So we've really enjoyed it. So when you're back to the culture, so when the culture is we enjoy what we do, it comes through, it translates, they reciprocate, and we've built relationships. I've been at this for 30 years. So if I've been doing this for 30 years and Max decides he wants to come put a truck in there, uh, you know, good luck, Max. But it runs deeper than you being a tenth of a penny. And people, years ago, people would leave you for a tenth of a penny a gallon until their customer goes dry. Because kind of how that supply chain works for the people that we work for is you have a distributor, okay, and he has an agreement with the oil company, Big Oil, Exxon, Chevron, Texaco, Shell, whatever, okay. So it's a distributor. And then he has stores, which is the retailer. And so the retailer buys from the distributor. Okay. And then the retailer gives it to the end user. So in between the distributor and the retailer is me. Okay. So I am an extension of the distributor. If the distributor is counting on me to make him look good and I let his stores run out of gas, you're in trouble. Okay. If his customer is communicating with me, hey, did you get my order or not? Hey, where's it at? All those little things. I'm the owner of the company and the customers have my cell phone number. 1,500 stores I deliver to.
Wow.
So that's our edge. So we're able to get a little bit better margin because we're local. I have no goals to go into Texas and haul fuel. It's not. If you came to me and said, "Hey, I can get you every Walmart in or Murphy in Houston," I'd say, "Good luck. Give it to somebody else. I don't want it."
Yeah.
So we really try to niche in and just try to outservice everybody. And being having the home field advantage has just been, I think that's the game changer and the difference. But yes, I mean, people will forget your name, but as soon as their store runs out of gas one time and their reputation looks bad, they're right back.
Right. Yeah, it's like we play I like how you say you're playing in a game where you have an edge, and I think a lot of guys get outside of that and try to play in games where they don't have an edge and get you in trouble. I'm curious about the model around,
Mhm.
in the I always relate things back to my experience 'cause that's the only way I know how to do it, but like is it like a fixed fee? We've got different business models where some things are like you get a fixed margin or you make a per unit margin. Other businesses are like you're taking the commodity risk. If you're a true marketer, it's like you're buying it and then trying to sell it for more. And if prices fluctuate, you got inventory and you're on the hook for that. There's credit involved with a lot of this stuff. So it's like,
Mhm.
you owe people a lot of money. People owe you a lot of money. That's a big complexity. But just like, and then like the commercial terms on these things, how simple or how complicated is it in terms of how the economics work on the
Well, if you're
transport
speaking
side?
to just the
Yep.
fuel hauling, it's really the liability exposure more than anything. The credit we're not worried about. I'm dealing with guys who have a lot more money than me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not. If I'm going to run out of money before they do, so I feel good about that. Now that theory has been proven wrong because we had one of our customers just went through the biggest bankruptcy I think in the entire industry,
Wow.
and they owed us some money, but it wasn't enough. Where I mean, it was not going to damage us. The fuel suppliers, yes, they have a lot more. So say the average load of gas is $30,000. So you bring the load of gas to the retailer, and that retailer now owes you 30,000. But what the fuel supplier does to hedge his bet, all those credit cards that are being accepted at these branded outlets, they're going back into the checking account of the distributor. Okay, so if you can see how that goes, it's even though it's Max's store, all your credit card receipts are going back to Chris, the supplier. So if I sold you a $30,000 load of gas and you took in $25,000 before now and when your bill is due, you owe me 5,000. So we're really able to kind of reduce our as a supplier, you're able to reduce your exposure when selling to retailers. Me as the common carrier, how we do it is we have basically 5 mile buckets. If it's 0 to 5 miles, it's X. If it's 5 to 10 or 6 to 10, it's this. It's 11 to 15, and so on. And so we have a rate. And what I do is I don't do it purely based on miles, which is how most trucking companies do it. Because you could have a store that's 10 miles away. Let make it easier. Let's say it's 30 miles away and the location is directly off the interstate. That's a whole lot different than if it's 5 miles down the interstate and then 25 miles off the interstate. Okay. It's going to take me a lot longer. So because I am local, because I know where I'm at, I understand the traffic patterns, I'm going time. Like, how long does it take me to do this? And so you have some of those outliers where somebody goes, hey, it's an interstate or this. And then we put it all together and we say, this is your rate. And whether that customer orders 1 gallon of gas or 8,500 gallons of gas, I bill them the same rate because it costs the same for me to drive my truck 30 miles, whether it's loaded or unloaded. I mean, within a few dollars of fuel savings. So we charge the same. So we are almost exclusively transporting full loads.
Well, I think the reason why I'm asking is hopefully people find value in some of these technical, more technical, kind of in the weeds, aspects of the discussion. Just because for me, it's interesting, and I wasn't sure if it's like truly like you just make money on hauling it, and it's just like a fee, and you're making fee based revenue, or if it was like where the chain of title and custody. It's like you take custody of the product, and are you having to pay then for the product, or is it like, I don't know enough about that side of the business. I know on the oil marketing side, like those guys will be the purchaser. So they're actually having to purchase the product and then resell it. And I didn't know if the way you guys are operating is more of just like a transportation business where you're just
Right
getting.
now, I've I've been both. I've been both. I've been all three. I've been a retailer, wholesaler, and just common carrier. Today, all I am is a common carrier since 2016. That's all I've done has been common carrier. So all I do is the gas belongs to somebody else, the distributor, and I bring it to the retailer. So let's call it $500 fee is what I may get on a load of fuel. Okay, so then out of that $500, and pay my driver, my my insurance, my dispatchers, and all that sort of stuff. And I got to try to figure out how to strip a little money out of there for myself.
That's, I think, a lot easier to wrap my head around than sometimes you get into this marketing side of it. It gets a little fuzzy. It's like, you're taking on more risk and doing more complicated things. And so, like, that's where you're in now. But before that, you were operating the gas stations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's kind of I sometimes feel like that's a seductive business to think maybe one day you'd want to own one. But then you start to think about all the different aspects of it and actually having to work there and, be involved with the riffraff that could come in. And I mean, the reason why I think it's a seductive business is because you go there all the time. And I spend a bunch of money randomly at gas stations. I'll go to the one by my house and just blow money on whatever energy drink or just something. I go there and get something. And so you tell a lot of good stories about that side of the business. Not everybody that listens to this is on Twitter or X, I
Okay.
guess is what it's called now. But what are some of
Okay.
the, for people that may be interested in owning it on the operating side, what would be some of the things you would tell them advice wise? And then also just maybe sprinkle in a story or two to give some
Okay.
backup to it.
Okay, so it is a fun business because it's very active. You're going to see several hundred people a day are going to come through the door. So if you're a people person, it's a lot of fun. Now, I'm going to contradict myself and say, hey, I'm an introvert because I pretty much am. But when I'm in my own setting, I'm great. So if I got home court advantage and I'm at work, it's excellent. It is a fun business, but you do also have to understand, for me, the best locations I owned were all inner city. And so when you're running inner city, then you've got that element you're working with. We've got vagrants. In fact, if you want to talk about it, we'll speak to it. And I know that I caught crap about it all night last night, but it's just kind of what it was. Hey, we were renting trucks. You're telling the vagrants, hey, you cannot stay here. Like, you can't. Like, I'm trying to run business here. Take money, go down the street, like whatever I can do. And so when someone would rent a truck, they'd say, hey, I want to look around it because you're renting the truck, and you open up the door, and there's a guy, sleeping in the back of it. And you're going, hey, if I catch you here again, we're going to have problems, and, we fixed that problem without implicating myself. We were able to relocate those people down the road and get them in a better situation where maybe somebody appreciated their business some more. Maybe it was a little bit more comfortable for them. We have been shot at. We have been robbed. We have had, you've shot people in the face with mace. You have, uh, oh my gosh. I mean, what's worse than having gunshots? We have had, you deal with the drive offs and people yanking the nozzle off the thing. And the biggest problem you have is it's just in general theft coming from three folks: vendors, employees, vendors, employees, and customers. And so you're trying to always go, okay, uh, how do I, get through the day because we don't have huge margins and have enough of all this volume enough to pay myself. So, again, you're dealing with people who aren't the highest paid. So if they don't make it to work, guess who's working? You are as the owner. So you can say, okay, well, you can put a layer between you and that person, get yourself a good manager, pay him 60, 70,000 a year. Well, if I'm only making 200, 250,000 a year, I don't want to pay that guy 60. I need to save that money. I need to oversee us. And I'm going to actually do better because I'm going to look after this money better than maybe someone who's making $60,000 a year. I think most people watch their money better than whoever they pay. I'm not throwing shade at anyone who's in the financial services business, but that's been my experience. So there's a lot of, I mean, it's difficult to scale because of the fact that we got thin margins, and I don't ever want to get lost. I always tell people, don't do this business. You go out and buy one gas station and you think you can go get rich. I mean, you're gonna make a living unless you really get lucky and get a top performing location, and you might, uh, you know, get a doctor's salary out of it. But for the most part, these guys are probably making 10, 15,000 bucks a month, bring home. It's a big investment to make home to bring that kind of money home. So, and a lot, and with the exposure and with what goes on with it. I mean, I talk about Precious. Okay, Precious was, my best location was directly across the street from one of the most famous strip clubs in the world. And what would happen is because of that element, we had ladies of the evening, kind of canvassing up and down our sidewalks. And one night I'm laying in bed. I mean, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I get a phone call from an Atlanta police department. Hey, Mr. Helguth, we need you to come down here. And I get down there and what's going on? And so my cashier was running a system with one of the girls who were working the streets, Precious, and she was renting space in the bathrooms, and I'm going, so we had like this prostitution ring going on in my store. I had no idea what was going on. So these are the things that you deal with that make for great stories, no doubt, but they make for a very challenging living, because your destiny is in the hands of people who make $8 an hour, at the time anyway, and people who don't think twice to, maybe shoot you or stab you or whatever. But it's a fun business. I mean, like I said, I'd rather not do anything else, but it's not for everybody because it is long hours, thin margins, and if you're up for it, hey, you'll love this business. If you don't mind working, stupid hours and a lot of labor, man, it's great.
Yeah, you don't want that's not a good problem, or it's not a fun thing to have when you got the prostitute ring going on in the bathroom. That's not what
It's
you want as a business owner to deal with.
it, but, but what it does do though is that you really learn a lot about human nature and actually the same business principles that just about everybody's doing. They're doing them on the streets, they're doing them in business and real estate, and it's all kind of like I'm like, man, like business like transcends all these different levels. Some is moral and not, but those are the ones who don't ever seem to stick. The people who are always out trying to outsmart the system, that you can't. It don't work that way. You cannot outsmart the system. You just got to say, hey, this is what it takes to do it. And you can be smarter than your competition, but you cannot do things. Mafia, they have great principles. As far as business ideas and infrastructure, but it doesn't stick because maybe what you're doing is not it, it's going to catch up with you at some point. It may not be this year or next year or 5 years, but it's going to catch up. It just always does. So that's that seems to be the differentiator between the two.
I think that like what you're bringing up, that random story, getting that call, seems like anything in entrepreneurship. And if you notice this, it's always something random. It's never
It
like
is.
the thing you plan for in the business plan. It's like that call that you get or that email or whatever it is. And you're like, oh, like I thought I had a normal day today. And then now I got this that's like falling in my lap. And that's just sort of like an analogy for like any type of startup thing that you do. It seems like, I don't know if you noticed that too in your career, but it's always something.
It is always something, and I don't think anyone can teach you these things. Okay, you can teach you how to balance a checkbook, and they can teach you how to, to run a budget, but they don't teach you for very, very few people anyway. Would bring you can't cover all the scenarios because again when you're dealing with hundreds of people a day, that's 100 or two or three or four or 500 different problems you're going to deal with, potentially. And so you just got to make it very efficient and get everybody out of there. But yeah, you don't ever know. But that's what makes you, a seasoned veteran. Like that's the stuff that when you're trying to hire people, it's like, yeah, you've been there, you kind of know. And then, for me being the old guy, it seems like in the Twitter sphere here, I recognize a lot of the things that I hear people saying and doing, and I'm going, yeah, we'll see. I don't have all the answers, but it again, it's the same things that, for me, I've had a lot of success, and I've had some failures, but it's real easy because like what I've done in business is the same things I use for social media, and it works there too. I'm just like, that just works everywhere. It's not that hard.
Yeah. Well, I think as you learn like as you try these different business endeavors, you kind of start to realize like not every dollar is created equal. Just because like
Hmm.
that's the thing that kills me about like small business Twitter. It's like I see these posts about you can make 200,000 or 300 grand a year, like, doing this business that you can buy. And I'm like, well, number one, you got to buy it. So you got to lever
Hmm.
up or have the cash. And then number
Right.
two, it's like you want to own a plumbing company, like you're cleaning up people's shit. Like that's like this is what you're
I
gonna
mean,
do. It's like cool
who
if you
could
can make
ask? Yeah.
300 grand, but that's, it's like so every dollar is not equal. Some businesses are way more stressful, more hands-on, or harder to delegate. And as you do different things, I think you learn kind of like, okay, well, cool, I can make money doing that, but is that really what I want to do?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm always gonna, not always. I advocate for small business because I like for my destiny to be in my control versus maybe a guy who's above me who's having a very bad day and decides he doesn't like me, and or I'm not in charge of the finances, and maybe they were reckless with spending and they've got to do some budget cuts, or maybe I'm worth a lot of money, so when crap goes bad, you're the first guy out. I don't know. Maybe that's the wrong attitude to have, but it's worked well for me. And I think that there's an opportunity, to really do something with your life, working for yourself. I love it. But again, this country can't exist on all just business owners. So if you're a business owner, then the goal is for me is to make it a great place for people to work who are not business owners. Okay. So what do I do? And respect that. And they're like, hey, I'm risk adverse. I'm risk off. Like I trust Chris, and he's not ever going to come in here with a bad day and fire me. So what do I need to do? I need to, I need to be responsible. So that's how it works. So, hang on one second. My dog's in here and she's snoring. So, okay, sorry. Go ahead.
I think like I wasn't trying to knock on the plumbing profession. It's you
Mhm.
need people to do all the different businesses. I think, and I agree with you, like not everybody is, it's not going to make everybody happy. It can seem like I used the word earlier, seductive to want to do something or buy a certain thing because you read about it on Twitter. My
Mhm.
main knock was on the people that make it, it seems easy and you look at it and you're like, I can make this amount of money doing this and that's better than my 9 to 5. Well, there's pros to the 9 to 5 too. I mean, there's pros, it's all trade-offs. And
Right.
so kind of leading into the next set of questions around the, you got more into the real estate side and just really wondering that model and why'd you gravitate towards that and kind of either flipping gas stations or getting in and being a more transactional type based business
Mhm.
versus kind of the own and operate. What shifted you there and how did those deals work?
So I realized early on that when I was running the gas station that, we were driving Toyotas and Chevys, and the suppliers were, had Lear jets. Okay. So that was kind of an easy association to make, going, yeah, that's the level I want to get to. I want to be a supplier one day. So their business model was this: they operate like what you hear a lot of traditional family offices operate as. They are a real estate company, and that real estate that you own, the people who operate that business out of there, well, they're buying their gas from you. So now I've got another business. So I've got a real estate business, and I've got a fuel sales company. Okay. So now I've got two assets. Okay. And then what I did is I threw in that other layer of transport. So I had really kind of three asset classes going on. And the system was pretty simple. Let me pay my bills with my oil company. Let me, and then I'd take the profits and buy real estate. And then once you kind of got going, I just kind of let the real estate kind of free roll and let it just keep on buying more real estate. So that just kind of sits over there. That's how you build your wealth. And then you built your income and your lifestyle around whatever the business made. Now you got to be responsible enough with the money to go, hey, if I made, $100,000, not to spend $110,000 on myself, I had to take, a piece of that and put it aside and save it and try to buy some real estate. So that was the model. And that's really why I got into it. And of course, I love gas stations because they're a great model for depreciation. Well, if I can depreciate, two or three or $400,000 or $1 million, well, that's basically an interest-free loan from the government until I sell it and I got the recapture. Then you decide. There's a debate whether you 1031 or So it's I'm not here to kind of hash that out, but that's how I've done it, and it's worked very, very well for me. But that's the way that most of these guys you see, these local distributors, that's our system: sell gas, make a living, buy real estate, build wealth. The real estate buys more real estate.
Yeah, it's a good formula. It's you try to get these multiple income streams and you juggle these different things. And I've done a lot of different stuff. And I think there was something when I heard about some of the troubles you went through at that period of your career, and it made me think about, it's easy to think, okay, when if you spread yourself out and diversify, something may be going wrong, but then something else over here is going right. And so you
Yes.
kind of have this sort of like leveling out. I think what people don't realize, and you kind of have to live through it at some point, is but the problem is when everything's going wrong, now all of a sudden, like, you don't have the ability. It's like you're stretched so thin. You've got a million different things you're trying to juggle. And it seemed really great when everything was going right, or when like maybe one thing was going wrong. You're like, that's fine. I got all this thing going over here that's kind of paying those bills. And so just talk about how, is that kind of what happened when you were getting into all these different things?
Yeah, I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't understand. I don't even know what a cap rate was until I was close to 40. I did not understand coverage ratios, and so I was just kind of going into things blind. I was doing developments, and I didn't even do the basics, which was get it rezoned prior to closing. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. Then I'm like, oh crap, that didn't work. So next time I buy a piece of property, I need to make sure these things are done. But no, because I just assumed everything was easy because that's how everybody makes things look. It's like, oh, it's easy to do that. And to quote Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. I did three things, and kind of going leading up into COVID, which was I had a fuel delivery company. Everybody burns gas. I mean, have been for years and years. It's never going to go away, not in my lifetime. Well, okay, so it does. Well, I've got real estate. So I've got a real estate, tenants pay me rent. Uh, you know, the gas goes away, we'll just live off the rental income. And then the third thing we had going on is like, well, I had a nice little stock portfolio, going. So I was like, okay, I'm getting some dividends over here, got high quality stocks. Well, then COVID hits, and we all know what happened. Everybody quit driving, no one paid rent, and then, of course, the stock market went in the can. So even the best plan that you think is, ironclad, it can't fail. I learned otherwise. Now, did we come roaring back? Yeah, but at the time, I thought we were all going to die. And so I thought we were going to die, and I'm laying guys off in a trucking company that needed drivers. I'm like, hey, you guys got to go. Well, that was foolish. And then the stock, I was like, ah, crap, I got to have money to pay the bills. Sell the stocks. We're all going to be dead, in 60 days. So I need some money to get us through. And so that's, you just don't ever know. So, again, I'm a little older than you guys. And so for me, it was always a goal. As stupid as I am, and I hear it every day, as I paid my house off, my lake house is paid off, my cars are paid off, and I'm going, hey, look, this time if everybody quits buying gas and everybody doesn't pay the rent, and the stock market goes to hell in a handbasket, well, my home's paid for, and if I can pay my property taxes, then I'm okay.
Yeah. Well, it's again, you got to live through these things. I feel like you've been through I was just coming out of college at the great financial crash in
Mhm.
'08, but I was like in it. I was around it enough to know that it was bad. I was like just starting to get into my first career. And so I knew that it was bad. And then I lived through the COVID thing, and that was really freaky. I mean, we had
Unbelievable.
oil prices going negative and people shutting in
Mhm.
all their wells, and we were making revenue off of marketing the product. And so it's like, what are we going to do? And
Mhm.
I mean, it's one of those deals where I think it shaped me kind of seeing some of these things to where I'm probably people are like, you're a big risk taker because you do entrepreneurship stuff. I'm like, I'm actually feel like I'm pretty conservative. Like just
So
because
yeah.
I've gone through some stuff. And you mentioned like the leverage aspect of things that's where things got sketchy. But
Yes.
how are you viewing leverage at that time? Was it, you talked about coverage ratios and things like that. Was it like, hey, like I'm always going to have this income coming in, so that's going to cover it? Or did you have like a big, stockpile that you saved up cash, but then that got burned through somehow? Or or was it just like things were
I
going
was
so
always
well.
running lean. Back in '08, I was running wide open. If I had $10,000 to invest in a property, I was putting it down. And what happens is, especially when you're younger, and me, maybe I had something to prove to the world because had dropped out of school and everybody thought, had written me off as a failure. I really was, probably pushing it harder than I should. But everybody was like, "Hey, I'm just putting a contract on a beach house. I'm not even closing, and I'm going to flip my contract on my beach house and make 50,000 or 100,000 or $200,000." And I'm going, that FOMO, like I wanted in, so I jumped in and I was buying, and I got really crushed as I was buying residential. The asset class that you can't really lose in. I figured out a way to screw that up, and I just didn't know what I was buying. I mean, I was used to I just didn't know what I was doing. I mean, bottom line, the bank gave me the money. Oh, well, they must have done their due diligence. I must be credit worthy. I'll take it. And so that was that. We had a series of customers that we were, when I bought the fuel distribution company and let's call it '04, we used all of our cash to buy that place, all of it. Well, the problem was that thing was losing money. So I used all my cash and it was losing money. So even though I was making some money, it's like whatever money we were pumping back into that thing. And then, I mean, we were literally running to the bank on Monday mornings with checks, like whatever came in on Saturday, like we need this, or hey, can you hold that draft until 10 a.m., please? And we'll be there with a bucket of money to cover these checks. I mean, we were in the negative every Monday. It was just the way it was. And I just was not educated, and I was paying attention to what everybody else was doing, and what the goal should have been was not right, and I didn't understand any of that stuff. And people who are on these platforms who get a chance to listen to people and learn from them on here, man, it just wasn't a thing. Like in '08 or '06, I don't even know if Twitter was even around. Was it? I don't even know. But if it was, I wasn't paying attention to it. And just you didn't have the information. We ran gas stations. No one taught me about real estate. And so banks came calling, and you losing money over here, and guys are going bankrupt on you because we were selling commercial fuels. So that's another part of the business, is that you sell to contractors, the guys who operate bulldozers and generators and that stuff. So we're selling them fuel on terms. I got to pay my bill in 10 days. They're not paying me for 30. Well, they burned all the fuel. Their GC didn't pay them. I wasn't getting paid. I had nothing to lean on. And so, yeah, you had a personal guarantee on a guy who's going bankrupt. What the hell good was that? So we had that sort of thing happening. And it's like, okay, well, now I can't pay my bill. It was awful, man. I mean, it was incredible. And you're just, at the time, the way we run my house is not typical to everybody else's. It's just I just put everything on my back, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to go. You trust me? I'm going to do it right. And so I really, really worked hard, earning my wife's trust. And then I fumbled the ball. You know, I'm going to say it was my fault because I'm the one who borrowed the money. Um, but so I didn't expect Tony to go bankrupt. I mean, I had people who owed me money all over the place. People couldn't pay me.
Yeah. Well, it seems like sometimes it's easy come, easy go, and you get
Yes.
sort of lulled into this idea that because you'd had this success, or I've seen times where, you feel like making money is easy.
Right.
And then there's other times when the things don't go the way you thought, and you're like, you maybe took for granted that money that you made. You're like, wow, that was actually a lot of money. That was hard to make. And I just threw it into this thing. And now all of a sudden there's a question mark whether I can get it back out. It's either illiquid or it's not the value in what I thought it was going to be. And it's just weird. Like you have that success, and then sometimes you just get it goes the other way just as quick sometimes.
It does. So let's talk about that. And it's important because it's relevant right now. When I was growing up, we only knew the good times. So if all you knew was the good times and you never experienced bad times, look, everything reverts to the mean. All right, you don't have to believe me if you don't want to, but I'm not saying you necessarily, Max, but I'm saying people, if you're listening, like things reverts back to the mean. And so all I knew was good times. So you didn't know how to prepare for the bad. So you just kind of like, this is just the economy. And then you realize, well, no, there's another side of this economy, and it's got, two heads, and it is tough. So a lot of people who kind of got started in their careers, in the last 10, 12 years, 15 years, you've been riding this huge bull market. Yeah, I know that people probably say it's been a little tough here the last couple of years. I mean, has it really? I don't know. I mean, it just, I, I've been okay. So if people are suffering, I don't know exactly who the guys who are suffering. I read some things, but I don't know who's really, I don't see a lot of, I know foreclosures are up, but are they at like catastrophic levels? And like, I just don't, if it is, I mean, please tell me, but I haven't seen what I saw, like an extended year after year. And I mean, as they say, it's a, it's when they say it's a really recession, like when your neighbor's home gets foreclosed on, and nobody around me is getting foreclosed on, So I think that we got, so do I think it's coming? It's going to happen. I don't know when. I mean, we can't always just keep on printing money, at some point. I mean, we can, but it, it it's, it will catch up. It has to. Now, I think it did a pretty decent job making a soft landing so far, but I'm no economist. Yeah.
Uh, we had a lot of commodity exposure in our business and we charge like a percentage type of fee. And so you just, I kind of have been through this like in 2014, the bottom fell out in the oil and gas industry. We went through like a decade of
Hmm.
just pain. And my dad was like, sometimes these things last for like decades, like these,
Yeah.
these periods of downtime. And you're like, oh my gosh. But, looking at the year and being like, hey, you could have a multi-million dollar P&L and the profit side, and then prices turn around and the next month you're like calculating payroll numbers and making sure that you can cover it. And those wild swings, I think, kind of leave you with that scar tissue, and it's tough to deal with. I mean, that was the question I had here, is like just the uncertainty of it. It seems like you were able to always hustle and keep pushing forward, but that's not something you can learn. I mean, that's a hard thing to do. There's a lot of people that just give up and file for bankruptcy
Yeah.
or just kind of quit and leave and don't do it.
It's just, it's the right thing to do. Um, it, how is it right that I create a mess and I leave it for somebody else? Like, how is that right? Okay. It's common courtesy. Like, if you really, really love your family, like, how do you say, I screwed it up? I created this disaster. I screwed it up. I'm too embarrassed to go file bankruptcy, but you go file bankruptcy because I'm not going to be around to do it. Like, I can't get my head around that, but I don't understand. I've never been there. I've just never have been there because I thought too much of everybody else. I'm the guy, my kid's crying. I'm walking out of the restaurant with him before he disturbs somebody else. So I'm never going to be that guy. And when you have people who believe in you, you it's what you need to do. Like, it was never a choice. And did I do things that were less than ethical? I did, and I paid. I got right. The universe got right with me. They squared it up with me and made me feel it, which is why I have adopted this other philosophy of, I'll have fun and I'll joke around on social media about some certain things, but I'm not going to do somebody wrong. I cannot. And the more I adopt that, the more it has come to me. And so, it's a conversation that can, that can really get spiral out of control. But because I don't know everybody's situation, but I know I've been broke. I know I've had property foreclosed on. I know that I have not had, I would know I've had my credit cards declined. I know that I've had no money to go do things. And it has never been in my mind other than I'm going to win. And it may not be today, but I'm going to freaking win. And everybody can, if that's what you believe. Okay. And so, again, if you go back 20 minutes ago and we got this conversation going, which was, how did I rebound so quick? Oh, you had relationships, you had this. Right. You do too. Okay. So when you go to rebound, if you didn't burn your bridges, it's going to happen like that. I mean, I went from broke to being able to retire in 8 years.
Yeah. Well, and I think that like those real relationships too, I've been at a time when I got let go from a job. It was right before I started our company, and you find out who your real friends are pretty quick and who the people you've treated right and
Mhm.
done good by, and then the people that were just transactional. and that's the only reason that they were your friend, it's like those people aren't answering your calls. And so you go through that, and I think you become better from it. And then the redemption story with you is awesome, and I want to get to that because we're getting here towards the end of the hour. But you basically were able to turn it around and then got to a point where you had an opportunity to sell your business and and get to a whole nother place in life, which surprisingly some people struggle with just as much or more. I mean, there's people that sell their business and they go off the deep end in a lot of different ways. They struggle with the success. They go buy a private jet and blow a lot of money and do a lot of
Mhm.
things like that as well. So how was it with the number one, were you predicting or thought that that could happen? And then number two, when it did happen, did it feel like you thought it would fail? And how did you deal with it?
When I went broke,
When you sold the when you had the redemption, you sold the company, when you came back and you said, the things turned out better probably than you could have thought. How was that feeling and how'd you
hindsight's 2020. I probably should not have sold. Okay. I took 3 years off, and they were 3 of the best years of my life. I have this deep-rooted fear or belief that if you are too extravagant, like, I believe that again, I know I'm just kind of a weirdo, but this is what makes me tick. I believe if you're trusted with a lot, like if the universe, or your creator gives you a lot that it's not yours, you're trusted with it, and how you the sort of steward you are with it is how you get repaid. That's my belief. And so it was incumbent on me that when I was given a lot was for me to give a lot. And so I did. I was gracious with my time, my money, uh, whatever gifts I had, and I was at a maturity wise, I was at the right point. I had a great time. I built a lake and stocked it with the best fish and planted fields, and it was fantastic. I was a team manager. It was my favorite job. I talked about this one time, which was I went out and I was, running a football team for free. I was spending thousands of dollars making this football team great. It was so much fun. But the problem is that I'm hardcore and very type A, and me and the guy that was the head of the program, we didn't see things the same way. I don't work for you, Chris. And I was like, yeah, I get it. And one of us got to go. It's his show. I'm out. So I feel like I did it right. I, made good money because again, you go back, Max, and I'm sure there's a time in your life when you didn't have a ton of money, probably when you were in college, and those are probably some of the best years of your life. And so money does not and it's so cliche, it doesn't translate happiness. And so for me, I just found like, I made enough, and I'm thankful for that. And I hope that everybody who's listening and can take anything from it. That's what you need to find. You don't need to find is 10 million, 20 million, 100 million. Don't do that. Like in your heart of hearts, like what is enough? Because, I'm 52, not to, tear this into pieces, but like I'm about that little challenge. I'm going to buy a Porsche 911. I'm that kind of like, well, you're contradicting everything you said, Chris. I am, but I'm doing an exercise, kind of going, look, I'm showing people how to do it, and I'm also showing you how you can enjoy it. But how do I enjoy it? It's going to be paid for in cash. And here's how I'm doing it. And then I'm taking this, and it's like, all you're going to do is get a 1 911. I'm going to get 1 911 and my investment and more money left over. It's not just a 911. Like that's, I'm going to take that, and I'm showing you how to do this responsibly. So that's part of it. And I don't want I want my employees and customers not to sit there and go, oh, Chris is, socking it to us and making money over here. And this is how I'm doing it. And it's part of the exercise.
Well, the thing you said about the money doesn't bring you happiness and how it's cliche, so many people will rip on that that maybe haven't gone through something. But I have told the story before where it's like I got to a point in my career where I was making the most money I'd ever made and I was miserable. I was just
Right.
miserable. I had like bad partnership thing going on. We had, all this stuff. And this was years ago, but it was like when I got to this point where in my life I would have thought it felt like I made it to where I kind of wanted to be at least like the goals I'd set for myself when I was younger. And I got to this one point and I was like, I was like, I was getting gray hairs. I mean, I still have not that many now, but that's when I first got the few. And I just remember being up all night, just being like, if this is what success feels like, I feel miserable. And so I kind of joke that I went through like a midlife crisis in my early 30s, where some people go through it in like their 50s. But then
Yes.
I think I came out of it, with more perspective and have evolved since then and try to I still get stressed about things, but it's just it's not how everything's not always what it's cracked up to be when you get there. It's like what are the sacrifices? What did you have to give in return to get the thing that you wanted? And I think
Mhm.
that's it's people don't realize it again until they go through it. But getting here towards the end, you've got something now that's new, which is the social media thing. And you've grown that very fast. That's something that's hard to do for a lot of folks. And I've played around in that space and it's exhausting, or at least it is for me. And there's
Mhm.
been a lot of pros and certainly some cons with it. But what was the impetus of that? And then
So I used Twitter for fun to keep up with sports because I'm a sports nut. And so just one day I'm on there and some of these other accounts came across. I had no idea what they were for, but I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I felt like I had something to add to the conversation. So I created my own little account. I was anonymous. I was a lot spicier when I first started. I came out gunslinging and just really kind of a lot more risky and pushing the envelope. And I spent so much energy trying to avoid who I was. I was like making it not fun. So I was like, fine, I'm just going to come out public. And then, of course, kind of the intensity of that sort of stuff kind of got dialed back just because, I don't know, it just was maybe I couldn't push the envelope as much as I normally would. It was all truthful, but I just kind of, keep some of that in my back pocket now. So the social media is a lot of fun. It is a lot of work. I do not know where I'm going with it. I'm not here trying to leverage money to get investors. I'm not trying to, sell more gas. Like I'm just having fun with it. And I'm really using the same things here that I do in business. And it seems to be working, which is being genuine, which is trying to be helpful, having a servant's heart, and trying to really do that sort of stuff. And then just keep it real because it's like, man, we got so, caught up in being woke and all that sort of crap. I'm like, man, it's just like people want to hear the real stuff. And so I got really into that. I am knowledgeable about what I'm talking about, but I don't know where it goes from here. I have some ideas, and I think that maybe what I would like to eventually do with it is really speak to the guys who do what I do. Because a lot of these publications are really geared towards the big companies. It's Coke really appealing to maybe Quick Trip and Wawa. As they should, they're moving a lot of their product, but there is a big part of our industry that doesn't know what a good supply agreement looks like, doesn't know if they're getting the right rebate on cigarettes, doesn't know the right buying clubs, doesn't know the right places to buy equipment. So I think that there's an opportunity there for that, for me to be the voice, but it's a lot of work. It's another job, and I've got one already. So I don't know that the time will be there for it, but we're just going to keep on, uh, both feet in. But I'm spending a lot more time on YouTube than I am Twitter. Not to try to throw shade at anybody, any platform or anything else. I've just found that I think that my content is better suited for video than it is manuscript or manual analog because being a high school dropout, I misspell every other word. And being from the South, I probably mispronounce every other word. But that's where it's going. But I'm having a great time. I love the audience. Lots of fun people. Met some great people, you included. So uh, that seems to be the benefit of doing it all for me. So I'm doing it wrong, but I'm having a great time.
well, it's one of those things that I would just say you got to keep it going and you're going to evolve. Like it's got to serve you, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
sure you got an audience and you care about whether they like it or not, but
Mm-hmm.
ultimately like it's got to bring you value. If it's not bringing you value, like we talked a little bit before the episode and it's like if there's certain things where you get into the routine of doing it and you're like this is not like really I'm not pulling as much out of this as like I once was or it's kind of just it changes, then I think you have to evolve and you've got a lot of good knowledge and wisdom to share. And I hope you do keep it up because I mean I enjoy following it. It's like
I appreciate it.
I get on and I want to see whatever the story or the post is, and I've watched a couple of the videos and they're good, and I'll encourage you to keep that up too because it gets way. It's for me that stuff was hard. Like the talking head stuff is not easy when you start. I don't think.
I'm getting better, and I think the last one I did I really liked. I've spent more time dealing with VAs than I'd have been better off paying someone $50 an hour than trying to get these guys to do it for six. It's just the most frustrating thing I've ever been through in my life. So that's taken away from a lot of the fun. But the thing with Twitter is you're on there, it's more social. It's like you're in there and making these relationships with a YouTube or a TikTok or an Instagram reel or whatever. or threads. That's more content done. Okay. So the way I am, being from the South, if you say something to me, I feel like it's me now to respond. So you were gracious enough to reply on one of my tweets. I need to say something to you as long as I got enough hours in the day to do it. So what happens is, I mean, look, man, there's times I've spent 10 hours in a day on that thing. I can't do that. Like it's all consuming. So I have to find a happy medium, but then I have to be willing to sacrifice growth, because you cannot grow and then not be all in. So it's very, and there's so many people in it right now. It makes it even, to stand out, you really got to compete, but it's a great thing. It's a lot of fun. The best people I've met, some of the very, very, very best, entertaining, smart, funny, like they're everything. It's all there, man. It's amazing tool. So you got to use it right. I just don't think I'm using it right.
Well, it's the point that I think you're trying to say this, and I've felt it is like it's not just the content, it's like the emotional drain and the distraction of like wanting to check it and then wanting to respond and then interacting with folks and then having random people like me reach out to want to talk to you for an hour on a podcast and
Yeah.
you want to do it all, but you can't do it all, but
Mhm.
you're doing great.
I
And I
appreciate it.
just really am glad we got to have this conversation and I appreciate you taking the time.
Man, I appreciate you, man. I mean, you guys got to remember, for me, it means a whole lot, because the fact that somebody wants to hear what you have to say, it's humbling. Because at home nobody does, right? So if you get an audience of people who are engaged, and I think that's what keeps me going the most, is I feel a responsibility now to the audience, which is I need to try to get them the product they need and the knowledge they need in order for them to be successful. So I put a lot on myself. That's just kind of how I'm wired, to my own detriment at times. But if I didn't like it, I wouldn't be doing it. And I say it all the time. If I don't like something, I'm not doing it. So I must be loving it. Okay. Some days more than others, but it's a great, great time. And so I am always very thankful for the people who even acknowledge my existence. So I thank you very much. And I appreciate you doing, and you doing, providing great stuff. Your videos are top tier. And your stuff is always makes me look at mine and go, God, I got to get the production value up, man. I am really slipping, man. These guys, these young guns are making me look rough. So I appreciate what you're doing big time.
I can send you. I just did watched a lot of YouTube. I didn't have any experience with any of this stuff either. It's a bunch, and I'll send you a few offline if you want to any like cameras or whatever. I can give you some tips on that because it took me a lot of pain and then buying stuff and realizing I didn't get the right thing, and then not ever selling it because I don't want to do the pain of doing that on Facebook. But yeah, if you I noticed one time you posted like the picture of the Pops gas station. It's like right by my
Mhm.
house, the one with the big pop bottle. If you're ever trying to do
Yes.
some research on it, want to stop by, or if you're in Oklahoma City, we'll would love to
And
meet you in person.
And I would love that, and I hope that that's really kind of my retirement goal. So, my youngest son is in ninth grade. So when he graduates, my goal is buy a Sprinter and travel around the country, and go visit these people I've met and the relationships we've made. Because, like I said, I'm really excited about that opportunity, because, like I said, it's fantastic, and that's what life is about, man. So it's much more, leaving a bunch of money to people is not going to be as important to them as the relationships you made and the lessons you taught them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Chris, for coming on, and
Appreciate you,
thanks, guys.
dude. Thank you very, very much, Max.